As 76-year-old Ozzy Osbourne makes his final bow, music circles are in shock. After years of health struggles and Parkinson's disease, the Prince of Darkness died on July 22, 2025. His unsettling confession suddenly sounds like a prophecy. "My last 4 years were horrible. My health stinks." It was more than a myth. This man kept walking after staring into the abyss. A man whose every breath defied torture. Parkinson's didn't weaken him simply. His legs lost power. He broke his spine in a terrible fall, making him gasp during procedures and stillness. As the world mourns, fate has struck its ultimate and most cruel blow. Under the Prince of Darkness's shadow was a warrior exhausted by war, gasping for peace. What happened to Ozzy Osbourne is not simply another tragedy. A sad, heartbreaking revelation that will leave you rattled long after the last note. Before we begin, just hit like to honor a legend who gave the world everything he had and now leaves a stillness stronger than any scream. Before the throng, lights, and Prince of Darkness legend were inscribed into music history, there was silence. A quiet so oppressive it threatened to crush a youngster who never dreamed. Growing up, he survived. A 1948-born John Michael Osbourne lived in a crowded, freezing home with 6 children and 2 parents in Aston, Birmingham's soot-stained slums. Tired to nourish. His factory-weary father thought feeling was weakness. His mother was exhausted from assembly line work and rarely offered gentleness. Eventually known as Ozzy, he was neither smart nor charming. He was overlooked, a poor child. School was no refuge. Letters mocked him. Numbers danced blurred. In the 1950s, dyslexia wasn't understood. Misinterpreted as dumb. He was labeled hopeless by teachers and humiliated by students. Names on playgrounds weren't the only bullying. Adults never inquired why it was fists in the hallway, knees to the stomach, and bloodied lips behind buildings. No way out at home. In response to his tears, his father struck him with a belt since weakness was unacceptable. Ozzy remembered people didn't sympathize with pain. The result was punishment. Silence increased around him. He adapted it like armor. Armor doesn't heal. Silence was awful by 1962, when he was 14. In a small, dimly lit bedroom, he attached a rope to his mother's washing line, mounted a chair, and waited for the world to end. Angry fate intervened. He was hauled down and beaten again by his father, as if violence could erase despair. Something broke or calcified in him that day. He stopped trying at school and talked only when necessary. He wandered through adolescence with a dormant gaze. The sound of laughter changed. I saw a fading boy in the mirror. At 15, he quit without qualifications, purpose, or plan. At slaughterhouses, construction sites, and factories, he tuned car horns. He was too distracted, ungainly, and broken to last. Jobs ended the same. Fired, forgotten, alone. Hunger gnawed him by 17 real. Bodily hunger. Shoes were holed. Clothes were threadbare. He no longer cared about his shattered hope. His lungs and life were running out of oxygen. The need didn't whisper. A scream. Winson Green Prison held him in 1965 for a bungled burglary. Reality hit hard behind those walls. Another convict attacked him on a terrible occasion. He retaliated with a metal chamber pot, his only weapon. Not bravery, but survival. Even in the darkness, a spark survived. The Beatles' She Loves You crackled on a jail radio one afternoon, sparking something. For the first time, Ozzy wanted to stay. He desired visibility, audibility, and loudness. "That moment transformed me," he said. "Though I couldn't play, I needed to be on stage." His redemption came from my screaming louder than my anguish. a cause to keep going. Not success yet. In that prison, the youngster who had begged for release made a commitment. Birmingham would not forget him. He'd shout, "He's terrifying, a memorable man." That decision spawned a legend from misery where agony developed a voice that would shock the globe. A sound broke the despairing solitude of his tortured youth just as it was lifting. A calling that would guide him for decades. At 17, Ozzy Osbourne was released from Winson Green Prison in 1965 without seeking forgiveness. He was wandering through a universe that had determined he didn't matter. His 6-week term for robbing a clothing store, more survival than criminal, didn't teach him anything. Merely reaffirmed his social worthlessness. He emerged from that cell more broken than ever. Song, not rescuer, sprang as a miracle. He thought the universe opened when he heard the Beatles' "She Loves You" crackle through a poor radio speaker. He later recalled experiencing God's voice through music, his faraway, sorrowful voice. His back was bruised and he was afraid, but that moment gave him a vision. He didn't know how, but he had to compose music. Screaming music, not polished or perfect. That spoke louder than his long-standing pain. That screamed louder than his childhood silence. That shouted louder than the darkness he almost fell into. In a small, dimly lit bedroom, he attached a rope to his mother's washing line, mounted a chair, and waited for the world to end. Just 2 years later, he heard a reason not to. That shout resonated by 1968. He found a dilapidated Birmingham rehearsal studio through a small newspaper post for a vocalist. Met 3 other haunted men. Despite lacking fingertips, guitarist Tony Iommi's riffs were furious. Geezer Butler, a bassist whose occult interests gave their sound discomfort. Drummer Bill Ward performed like thunder in human skin. They started as Earth, but a serendipitous meeting with Black Sabbath helped them become more. A purpose emerged. According to Ozzy, why not give folks music that scares and moves them if they pay to be scared? They weren't looking for fame. Their goal was to survive and cleanse something terrible and unspoken. They had boring music, exorcisms. Their pain was distorted. They cried. Guitars are made. They released their self-titled debut album on February 13th, 1970. The dark, gloomy, even cursed date felt fateful. Critics cowered. It was diabolical, filthy, and unlistenable. The young, shattered, and lonely listened. They felt detected. In a world where no one inquired, Ozzy screamed their status. Their second album, Paranoid, was composed quickly and accidentally that year. It became gospel. War, Pigs, Iron Man, and the melancholy title track were lifelines. Not classically trained, Ozzy's voice. Even tuning was wrong. But it was very raw. This voice belonged to someone who had overcome the brink and dared the world to push him again. He stated later, "I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew it had to be loud." There was more to that noise, revenge. The scream proclaimed, "I survived and I won't be quiet." Not needing to, he never took a music reading lesson. His sorrow was the music, his wounds the lyrics, his past the percussion, and his soul, it was the amp. The Aston boy who was called stupid, worthless, and invisible resided underneath the lunatic image and stage antics. Boy was still wailing, but suddenly the world was listening. Not only did Black Sabbath pioneer a genre in the early years about restoring life, never built heavy metal Ozzy. His blood created it. His every concert growl and riff was a defiance of his fate. He was troubled even as fame slammed him. People roared, records sold, headlines blared. Voices inside him roared louder with each applause. The hurt persisted despite achievement, only masked it. Although he became a legend, he still felt like a runaway shouting into the void. The world shifted with that cry. More than music was built. A myth was created. Built memory, the legacy was forged in pain, even resilience. The mid-1970s saw Ozzy Osbourne at the top of heavy metal. His spirit was crumbling beneath the shouting throng and glaring stage lights. Inner demons no spotlight could reach drowned out the same voice that had penetrated a generation's quiet. The pioneers of thunderous music for misfits, Black Sabbath, were a global phenomenon, broken and enraged. But for Ozzy, the louder the music, the louder his emptiness. In private, he was unraveling, plagued by vicious habits, childhood traumas that had never healed, and fame's crushing weight. Albums like 1970's Paranoid and 1973's Sabbath Bloody Sabbath made the band famous. Ozzy was fading into shadows the stage lights couldn't track. His bandmates noticed the missed rehearsals, nonsensical remarks, and loss of spark behind his crazy eyes. Tony Iommi, his riffs brother, cooled. Unspoken blame and tired quiet infiltrated their relationship. The final betrayal occurred in 1979. Firing him, distanced, no respect. They delegated it. Ozzy recalled, with abandonment in his voice, that they didn't have the courage to tell me. I had that band. It ruined more than a career. His refuge was ripped from him. For Ozzy, Black Sabbath was more than music. The only location where chaos made logic and his brokenness was powerful. Without it, he was shunned like a warning label. His spirit drowned in a Los Angeles hotel room with curtains pulled. He confessed, "I just sat in that room. I was dulled to feeling nothing. That silence made me think I would fade away." In public, he was still Ozzy Osbourne. In that room, he was a shell of himself. Heartbeat ghost. The man who taught the world to scream locked inside. But legends endure. Changes occur. In Ozzy's darkest hour, ashes stirred. Sharon Osbourne, Sabbath's manager's daughter, witnessed more than a legend who died. He was unfinished, she saw. She lifted him from the rubble and said, "You were the band's charm. This is possible without them." She hit moist stone with her faith like lightning. Young, disciplined, and incredibly talented Randy Rhoads followed. Besides playing, his guitar cried, flew, and shouted. Randy was no mere bandmate to Ozzy, he was his lifeblood. They created 1980's Blizzard of Oz, a survival album. Anthems like Crazy Train were resurrections. Each chord and lyric defies. I remain. Still important. In retrospect, the fall wasn't the end. Crucible. Broken beyond recognition, Ozzy revealed his raw, resilient fire, though the road ahead would be filled with loss, pain, and struggles that would leave deeper scars than fame could heal. His soul shouted loudest now. "I was out of control," he said. Despite that, I continued. I persisted. Ozzy and Randy Rhoads' relationship went beyond music. Spiritual, salvational, almost divine. Randy brought more than a guitar to Ozzy. He broke the oppressive tempest like a light. Ozzy, still hurting from being booted out of Black Sabbath and barely sane, saw Randy as proof that beauty, discipline, and purpose could survive in a brutal and pointless world. Young Randy was focused, not reckless. His imagination poured like fire through glass, shaped and precise, unlike Ozzy's. With their songs, they built salvation. Their 1981 follow-up, Diary of a Madman, was a defiance. Ozzy was revived as a force after being written out. Randy paved the way. Randy wasn't simply a guitar player, he was my friend, my little brother, and the only reason I persisted, stated Ozzy. Beyond music, they connected. Ozzy survived a delicate rebirth on his heartbeat. They were fantastic on stage. Randy was in control. Ozzy was wild. They laughed, talked, and respected each other off stage. Ozzy admired Randy's talent and soul. Ozzy remembered his grace. Like he didn't have forever, he made every note count. The urgency of their collaboration was rooted in the belief that lightning doesn't strike twice and must be honored. But storms end. Ozzy later admitted he felt it, that eerie quiet before fate is cruel again. Their altitude was excessive. It eventually shattered and didn't crack gently. Everything would break. Ozzy never saw the nightmare coming on. March 19th, 1982, when a scream fell silently from his throat. When touring Leesburg, Florida, the band stopped at their bus driver's property. A modest private plane sat idle, tempting this restless morning. Licensed pilot driver used it for a joyride. Randall Rhodes, always interested and gentle, joined cosmetics artist Rachel Youngblood. It was supposed to be harmless, a sky loop for a thrill before the long drive. Ozzy watched from below, smiling mildly, possibly plagued by an unnamed shadow. On the third pass, the jet did the unthinkable. Wings hit the band's tour bus. On impact, the plane swirled, fell, and caught fire. Aged 25, Randy Rhodes died. Comet extinguished in daylight. Ozzy dashed to the crash. His voice broke, yelling Randy's name. It wasn't just fire. They concluded. He dropped beside the crash, shivering and crying, unable to fathom what was happening. For hours, he was distraught. He was silent for days. His weeks were filled with numb astonishment. His later words, "I lost part of myself that day. The fire consumed more than Randy. It was my hope, music, and inspiration. Fate lured the man back into darkness after a buddy saved him. The fall felt bottomless this time. Sharon couldn't initially reach him. Shows canceled. Laughter ceased. House quietened. The universe seemed to have muted the tune. Dead Randy broke and hollowed Ozzy. Though time would force him to keep walking, part of his spirit stayed in that flaming wreck on that merciless March morning. Ozzy watched a small plane carrying Randy burst in a fireball in fear. An Ozzy piece died then. He was unable to speak or eat for weeks, immersing himself in booze to cope with the loss. According to him, losing Randy was like losing part of my soul. To die was my wish. Not to play music. Nothing interested me. It went beyond grief, paralysis, emotionally. Once his lifeline, Sharon struggled to contact him. She acknowledged, "I believed he was gone forever." Something mysterious emerged from that anguish. Instead of moving on, Ozzy wrote again to remember. He dedicated every line and microphone scream to his forever friend. Ozzy felt he had to keep the music going for the fans and himself, even though the anguish would never end. Except Randy. Survival became defiance, and every show after held a tragic legacy. Despite his injuries, he moved. So Ozzy Osbourne was alive. One would assume surviving the unthinkable would teach the soul to heal. Grief defies logic. Ozzy Osbourne didn't heal from Randy Rhodes' death. They described his plunge into a secret, merciless darkness that clawed at him day after day until even music, his last respite, couldn't drown out the quiet. Noise and numbness swept the 1980s. Tours felt like war zones. Hotel rooms shattered reflections of his past. A madman with smeared eyeliner and a mythological persona appeared on stage. However, Ozzy was fading backstage. Fluctuating, unattainable, barely hanging on. Sharon, his anchor, tried everything. She refused to go after saving him. His inner fog sometimes blocked her affection. Ozzy subsequently admitted, with a whisper, "I wasn't even in my own life. I left." By 1987, drinking consumed him. Pills confused reality and delusion, waking and escape. August 1989 was a night of massive collapse. Not wrath, One night, lost in himself, Ozzy did something so horrible that it shattered everything he loved. He nearly destroyed Sharon, his everything, in a haze he scarcely remembers. "It wasn't me," he admitted. "I felt like a bystander. Wake up and realize what occurred. And I broke. Existence no longer interested me. Confused and hollow-eyed, he was hauled away that night, too overwhelmed to comprehend what had transpired." Sharon said, "I didn't know whether to press charges or call for help, with more anguish than fury. Something had to change for us both. Thus, Ozzy was sent to treatment and a place to face the damage. Ozzy faced the wreckage of his future self inside those walls, without cameras or acclaim. Children no longer recognized him. That man didn't either. Nobody dressed up, no guitars, just silence." "What do you fear most?" a counselor asked. Ozzy immediately replied that she'll leave since I've pushed her too far. Sharon stayed. Instead, she arrived with exhausted but fiery eyes and whispered, "You are still in there? I understand. No forgiveness. War." Every day in that center, Ozzy fought for the right to maintain the love he nearly lost, not fame or redemption. Fighting was brutal. Instead of cured, he left thinner, quieter, and haunted. But now realizing how far he had fallen and how important rising was. He said years later, "That's when I realized I couldn't keep falling and pretending it was flying. I had to decide life. There was no quiet after the storm, only a heavy hush that pressed down like morning." Ozzy Osbourne, shorn of bluster and performance, stood at the edge of the life he'd shattered, unsure if his former self lay beneath the rubble. Ozzy was arrested but not imprisoned in 1989, after the night he nearly lost himself to his darkest self, and the woman who had saved him became a victim of his unraveling. But to psychiatry, it wasn't bad. His final respite. No music, lights, or screaming masses were inside those walls. One man, engulfed in guilt and shame, scarcely talked for weeks. The renowned heavy metal voice whispered regretfully in a dim recovery hallway. Outside the confines, Sharon waited. She returned in rebellion, not responsibility. She noticed the glimmer of the man embedded in the ruins that others missed. She later revealed a deep-seated spark in him. I knew it existed. Ozzy started fighting in that antiseptic recovery center. Not viewers or critics, but the chest monsters. His detox burned toxins and delusions like wildfire. It caused every memory, wrong, and scar to surface. It was fighting, not healing. But trembling and determined, he battled his way ahead, cognizant, but uncured. He performed the inconceivable in 1990. His return to music was marked by lucidity, not youth's rage. After reconnecting with Zakk Wylde, they began writing No More Tears, a survival album. The 1991 release was more than a return. Recounting. Not simply radio hits, Mama, I'm Coming Home, and Road to Nowhere. They were confessions from a damaged man rebuilding. Ozzy said, "I was trying to be human again," with a quiet yet sure voice. World listened. Once afraid his quiet was permanent, fans saw him rise as a man, not a myth. However, the fight continued off stage. All shows were successes, all sober mornings miracles. Sharon fought with him, not for him, now as a soldier. Ozzy said he owed her everything. "She saved my life daily." Once shaken by madness, their marriage became a tribute to flawed but unyielding persistence. Ozzy worked hard in the early 1990s, afraid to quit. He continuously toured, created new music, and planned a 1992 farewell tour. He returned repeatedly, as usual. Despite his survival, the suffering persisted. Though his lyrics, it tormented him quietly. settled behind his eyes, and the audience noticed. The reason Ozzy howled into the dark on stage wasn't for show. Survival sounded. The man screamed to survive, not merely be heard. In retrospect, he replied, "I never dreamed I'd live this long. I try to make every day count because it's borrowed." Not just a comeback. For those who knew the full weight of his cage walls, near losses, craziness, and mercy. Resurrection. The Prince of Darkness peered into the abyss and fought his way back, bruised and bleeding, but breathing. The wounds never healed, but he wore them as proof. Proof. Survival isn't luck. This is a choice you make in despair and every day after. Just when Ozzy Osbourne was clawing his way toward a fragile peace based on broken memories and hard-won redemption, fate dealt him another cruel blow. The body finally accounting for its years. Early 2000s should have been golden. As a new generation rediscovered his music, the Osbournes, a wild, unscripted look into his personal life, made him a beloved cultural hero. Vanished Prince of Darkness, replaced by a confused but lovable father who fumbled with TV remotes and traipsed his kitchen in mismatched attire. Ozzy became a household name in houses that had never heard a Black Sabbath riff after the show debuted in 2002. A man on a tightrope was behind the strange domestic fame. Ozzy, now in his 50s, held the weight of a dangerous existence. Joints stiff, reflexes slow, and health unpredictable. Thread broke on December 8, 2003. He lost control of his quad bike and crashed into the ground while riding over his land. The impact broke his clavicle, ribs, neck vertebra, and lungs. His breath halted. Ozzy Osbourne was transported to the hospital and placed on a ventilator, living in a silent, inert, and terrifyingly vulnerable coma for 8 days. Sharon said, "I thought I'd lose him. I anticipated farewell." Worldwide, fans held their breath. Was this the end after so long? Ozzy defied expectations again. He appeared squinting against the hospital lights, whispering words no one expected to hear again. Doctors said it would take months or years for him to walk, acquire strength, and breathe again. Ozzy did the impossible his whole life. He rebuilt via heart-pounding pain and rigorous therapy. Each breath and small step was a success. Just months later, he walked onto the Brighty Awards stage to loud acclaim from fans and a world that had seen him fall and rise again and again. Scars from the accident were undetectable by X-rays. A persistent whisper of chronic pain made moving difficult some days. Ozzy said, "I wake up hurting but breathing. Enough." Today, it's a deep, stubborn growl rather than a roar. Defines Ozzy's later years. Loud guitars and fireworks don't strengthen him. Being persistent even when everything hurts causes it. From rising when staying down would be easier. Surviving and suffering became poetry for him. One thing became evident when he returned to the spotlight, slowly but unbowed. Some legends endure. Outlast fire. Just when Ozzy Osbourne thought he had endured all life could inflict. When the storms had abated and the scars had nestled into silence. 2019 brutalized him beyond his worst days. No dazzling lights or booming crowds to drown out the fear. Just a calm day at home and a single mistake that changed everything. A small fall became a disaster. His spine's metal rods, fused during a 2003 quad bike crash, were expelled instantly. Instead of recollections, the past returned with vengeance, ripping open physical and mental wounds, forcing him back into an indescribable pain. In an interview, Ozzy whispered, barely steady, that doctors delivered a second soul-crushing blow, a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, a silent, relentless enemy that slowly, cruelly eroded the very core of what it meant to move, stand tall, and be free. For Ozzy, who had once ruled the stage with unstoppable fury and fire, it seemed like identity theft. Tremors started, balance was off, then followed the uncensored confession. I can't walk right. I wobble. A truthful man without masks or rock star persona. He spoke honestly and with grief. It went beyond diagnosis. Recounting. He faced time in a world that had seen him defy death. These past several years have been absolute misery, he said in his dying years, exhausted and sad. Pain, dread, powerlessness, not theatrical, was real. Sharon stayed with him as usual. Even her devotion couldn't stop the illness's slow, ruthless growth that changed the man she loved. Through it all, Ozzy fought his body and remorse. He lied to supporters to protect their hearts, not his reputation. Who had given him strength for decades, he didn't want to disappoint. But when the truth emerged, the world didn't react. It returned. Backers rallied. He who endured his anguish showed amazing strength. Still, he created, despite his bones' disarray and voice's tremor. He published Ordinary Man in 2020, a painful but bright album of rebellion. Not simply music, it said, "I'm still here, with grief and grit. I'm not done." Ozzy's war wasn't only over music. This was for meaning, for the right to continue when everything was screaming to halt. Even with canes and painful joints, his every step was a rebellion, a protest with every note. Despite surgeries, repeated hospital stints, and times he wasn't sure he'd stand again, he never gave up. He said, "I'm not ready to hang up my mic yet." In that sentence was everything. Hope, fire, memory. That made his narrative poignant. Not his fame or legacy, but his perseverance, despite all his reasons not to. Despite his aging, Ozzy Osbourne reminded the world of one final reality in his final years. Legends don't fade quietly. Leave echoes. Although the lights have gone out, that raw, imperfect human echo continues to resound. Ozzy Osbourne lived in darkness without fireworks or stage lights at 76. It originated from calmer, colder, and more relentless time. In his latter years, Parkinson's disease became worse, changing his life. The once unshakable Prince of Darkness woke to trembling hands, weak legs, and a voice that had previously shattered stadiums that now echoed. All days started uncertainly. Some mornings he didn't recognize himself in the mirror. Despite his weakness, he persisted. "I wake up and don't recognize myself," he added. "But I'm still battling. No end yet." Fewer venues were in his universe. Survival-focused, therapy, medication timing, physical support, and 24-hour care became his daily routine. Sharon, his partner through every fall and resurrection, stayed with him. A partner and pillar of strength. Their home in Buckinghamshire became a sanctuary for a man who once raged over stages but now moved quietly. Railings dotted halls, ramps replaced steps, and every corner whispered adaptation. Still, Ozzy hunted pieces of himself in those walls. On good days, he sat in the garden with headphones listening to the riffs that constructed his universe. He sometimes entered his home studio to remember the man who lived inside the music, not to record for admirers. His mind stayed keen as his body weakened. He joked, cursed, and stunned interviewers with dark humor and deep honesty. Death was discussed without dread. He mentioned the next trip is without the sound check. Ozzy was outspoken and combative even in decline. Despite the confidence, acceptance was silent. Canceled all remaining concerts. Behind him was the stage. Osbourne, as usual, refused to end on that note. He said goodbye gracefully and firmly. calm passing for a man whose life was anything but. His pain and perseverance legacy rings louder than any encore. Ozzy stopped performing. However, each breath, memory, and muttered song confirmed one final truth in his final years. Music doesn't kill legends. Live on. The resulting Hush, a generational closing prayer, occurred on July 5, 2025, rather of a performance. With the original Black Sabbath members, Ozzy Osbourne returned to Birmingham, the birthplace of the legend. Though titled Back to the Beginning, it felt more like the finale. The arena held over 40,000 fans, and over 6 million watched worldwide. When Ozzy entered slowly, leaning on a cane with Sharon, the crowd went silent. Respect, not restraint, not simply a show. They parted in physical and emotional vibrations. Age cracked his voice. He shook hands. On hearing the opening notes, time blurred. Memory stained every line. Riffs felt like resurrections. The hearts broke as he muttered, "This is it." Later, he claimed this may be his last stage appearance, with peaceful conclusion. Curtains didn't fall that night. Dusty, it floated down. A thunderous career. Ozzy, as usual, rose. His $190 million performance proceeds went to causes he cared about. Cure Parkinson's, Birmingham Children's Hospital, Acorn Hospice. It was a final promise to remain a light even in bodily decline, not just a goodbye gift. Ozzy addressed his supporters in his final weeks through calm moments of honesty, not mayhem and pyrotechnics. On the Osbournes podcast, he and Sharon revealed their lives for performance. He was in the garden while not on stage. Grandchildren gathered at his feet. He told stories of bats and madness, love and healing, darkness and salvation from a world that once screamed. These tales weren't about turmoil by then. Their topic was survival. Ozzy Osbourne taught us one last lesson before his death on July 22, 2025. He has lived his whole life. Legends aren't made of noise. The stillness proves them. Their echoes rise even when they fall. When stadium roars had given way to soothing garden winds and family murmurs, Ozzy Osbourne found himself surrounded by legacy, not celebrity. Personified by his offspring who acquired his name and soul. Born in 1983, Amy Osbourne, his oldest, rejected reality TV to pursue her own music under the name ARO, proving that silence can be as powerful as a shout. Kelly Osbourne, born 1984, embodied Ozzy's resilience, gracefully irreverent, bold yet grounded. She was a singer, designer, and media personality who revered her father's legacy while aggressively creating her own place. Beyond reality TV, Sharon's youngest son, Jack Osbourne, became a professional documentary producer, exploring the supernatural and mysterious. Jack was his father's constant companion, following him to hospital visits, overseeing business decisions, and carrying a legacy too heavy for one man. From Ozzy's first marriage to Thelma, Riley had Jessica and Louis, two unknown names. Yet still within Ozzy's universe. While keeping their lives covert, they stayed close to relatives. Through his public appearances, Ozzy's love for his children, especially Kelly and Jack, surged. At events, in interviews, or in rare family portraits that captured more than warmth. Survivorship through generations. They became his bloodline, the keepers of his fire, and the custodians of a myth that refuses to die as he slowly faded off the stage that defined him. The intention Ozzy put forward may have been his Twilight's most compelling chapter. Gone was the man who linked wealth to freedom. As of 2025, Ozzy felt his riches was a compass, not an empire. His will was completed in early 2024 out of respect for the life he miraculously survived. Sharon, his 5 children, and his grandkids would inherit his estate with health and education trusts. But what went beyond the bloodlines set this Will apart from other rock stars. The causes that saved him after everything else failed received a large percentage of his wealth. Musician mental health programs, addiction rehabilitation, education scholarships for working-class youngsters who want to play chords and distortion, and lifelong financing for animal rescue shelters. Ozzy liked dogs' quiet loyalty, even in pandemonium. A private message attached to the will, he wrote, "They gave me back to myself. I owe them the rest." Sharon said this memo would be read when needed. After screaming into the emptiness, a man leaves a vow. In his final act of dedication, Ozzy asked that his solo royalties support these causes following his death. "Music rescued me." He stated it might rescue someone. 10 words summed up life. Since his second Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 2024 for solo excellence, his image has gone beyond cultural. It's spiritualized. University instructors repeat his lyrics, admirers get tattoos, and murals feature his face. The greatest homage is the individuals who fought for him, not platinum records. The insane man who bit bats and defied death, Ozzy Osbourne, is dead. No longer fighting the dying light, he faced it. I entered in with memories and defiance, not fear. If these words touched you, if his voice evoked youth, anguish, or survival, leave a comment, share a story, or say thank you. Ozzy's legacy involves more than anarchy. It proves even the most broken can brighten the world. Get rest, Ozzy. I hope the cacophony stops and the calm brings you serenity. No more pain, surgery, or Parkinson's at his new place. Nothing but light, distant guitar echoes and a timeless place where legends no longer fight. Relax, Ozzy. After a lifetime of screaming in pain and loving the lost, you deserve this tranquility.